Now in this part, we're going to be talking about the other kinds of Streptococcus. So the first one is a group B Streptococcus, known as Streptococcus agalacti. This usually resides or lives in the vagina, and that is why pregnant women are screened for it. And if they are positive for Streptococcus agalacti, they're also treated because it can be transferred to the infant during delivery, leading to pneumonia. It can also lead to meningitis of the neonate. Okay, so again, something that we have to screen for and treat if they come back positive. Now, group D is also called enterococci because it's found in the enteric system or in the digestive system. So group D, the Enterococcus faecalis and Fecum endurans. And again, I'm not going to ask you about individual names here, but I do want you to know that they are normal colonists of the intestine, hence the name Enterococcus. It is still a streptococcus, but because it normally lives in the enteric system, it gets a nickname of an enterococcus. These usually cause opportunistic infections. They're not very aggressive, but if somebody is immunocompromised, they can definitely cause infections. Now, group C and G, these are common flora that are, kind of can be isolated from different parts of the body and are not very, again, aggressive. If they do reach areas like the kidneys, they can lead to glomerulonephritis, but they're not as aggressive as the pyogenes, for instance. So how do we diagnose the group A infections? Well, we are going to be looking in this rapid diagnostic test. We are looking for the C carbohydrates. Okay, that's how we're, again, hence the name, the group A. So here you can see like a positive test where the antigen and the antibody basically found each other, and there is this change in the appearance. Here you can see a negative test. So how do we treat the infections, whether they're group A or B streptococcal infections? They're treated with penicillin, okay, and if somebody has a history of the development of a rheumatic fever, or they get like these repetitive strep throats, we can usually give them a prophylactic long-term penicillin treatment. Now, these are still alpha hemolytic streptococci. They're known as the viridans group. The viridans means green. Okay, so when these hemolyze red blood cells, they are going to cause incomplete hemolysis, and that's why we see the color green. These are all examples of them. The most important one is the Streptococcus mutans. All of these are basically found in normal flora, found in the gums and in the teeth and the oral cavity. They are low virulent, they're not very invasive. That's why they need a little bit of help to invade the tissue. This is going to depend mostly on, dental procedures or surgical procedures in the oral cavity that will facilitate and help the entry of these organisms into our bodies. Now, the viridans group, it can be responsible for a very serious infection, though, but remember, they're not aggressive. They have to be somehow admitted into the body, but when they do get there, and if a person has a pre-existing heart condition, they could be at risk of developing what is known as a subacute endocarditis. Subacute endocarditis is the inflammation of the endocardium of the heart, and here you can see that this is the inside of the heart. They have what are known as these vegetations that happen on the valve, damaging the valves. These are colonizations of the bacteria on the valve, forming biofilms there. So again, if somebody has a pre-existing condition and they need to get dental work done, they have to get prophylactic antibiotics prior to the procedure. The Streptococcus mutans, if you kind of want to see how they form these biofilms, again, I don't recommend doing this, but if it has happened where you have forgotten to brush your teeth before you go to sleep, when you wake up in the morning, there's a little slimy layer on the teeth, and that slimy layer is the biofilm that was made by Streptococcus mutans, and it is really the basis for plaque to accumulate. And obviously they have a role in dental cavities. Now, another streptococcus is called Streptococcus pneumoniae, and this causes pneumonia, obviously from the name. It has a nickname, it's called the pneumococcus. It is the cause of the majority of bacterial pneumonia. It can also lead to otitis media. Okay, so know that the pneumococcus, which is again the nickname for Streptococcus pneumoniae, causes bacterial pneumonia and otitis media. So what is the epidemiology and how was the pneumococcus how was it introduced into the ear and how was it introduced into the lungs? So a lot of us, about half of the population, actually have pneumococcus as a normal part of the flora of the nasopharynx. Okay, so this is where usually pneumococcus lives. It doesn't cause disease because that's where it should live. Know that these diseases happen not from spread from one sick person to another, but it's more of an endogenous infection where the pneumococcus that usually lives here, got aspirated into the lungs and lodged into the lungs, leading to the bacterial pneumonia. Or this right here, that tiny opening that you see, that is the opening of the eustachian tube. So basically, if the bacteria goes through that eustachian tube, it could lead to otitis media. And again, the risk of the infection in bacterial pneumonia caused by pneumococcus is not very high from one sick person to another. Same case when it comes to otitis media, but the person will most probably infect themselves, and that's why we call it an endogenous infection. And the individuals who are more susceptible are the extremes of age, so the very young and the very elderly, or if they're immunocompromised, that puts them at a higher risk of developing bacterial pneumonia or otitis media caused by pneumococcus. Here you can see this right here is a healthy tympanic membrane or the healthy drum. Here you can see a little bit of pus and swelling and redness indicating otitis media. So how do we diagnose pneumococcal infections? They have a capsule, okay, and that is what we are going to try to look for in order to identify them. We do a test called a quelling test. It is a test that checks for the visibility of the capsule and where the capsule swells up a little bit. So here, for example, this is a positive test, and you can see that the capsule is found around the pneumococcus. That is a positive quelling reaction, and it is diagnostic for pneumococcal infections. While here you do not see the capsule, and this is a negative result. So that could be maybe a different kind of strep. Okay. So how do we prevent pneumococcal infections? Well, usually it is treated with penicillin. The bad thing is that there's a little bit of development of drug resistance to it. There are vaccines that we give again to those who are at risk of developing pneumococcal infections. The vaccine is against the capsule. Okay, so the antigen here that we would like to develop antibodies towards would be the capsular antigen. So that again is what the vaccine targets. Okay. So let's make sure we're all good here. The bacterial pneumonia by Streptococcus pneumoniae is highly contagious. Is that true or false? If you answered false, you are correct.